The movie kicks off with a bunch of cars owned by government folks. They're escorting this young guy from a gang to court. The young dude wants to spill the beans on all the bad stuff his gang has been up to. As they get close to the courthouse, they spot lady federal agent named Helen. She's keeping a close eye on the young gangster. But out of nowhere, this unknown guy pops up and kills the young gangster. Next scene, we're in a prison. There's this dude named Jade who just woke up. In the afternoon, Jade's playing chess and he notices a new inmate getting picked on by the others. Jade feels bad and goes over to the new guy, inviting him to play chess. That shuts up the bullies real quick because they're scared of Jade. After that, Jade decided to help out the new guy get used to life in the slammer. The very next day, the prison warden hauled Jade into a room because someone wanted to talk to him. It was Helen. She explained that she was on a mission to bust a gang leader named Muter. She also mentioned that she'd nabbed Muter's gang members who were supposed to spill the beans in court. Sadly, those gang members got wiped out right near the courthouse, just like we saw in the beginning of the movie. Curious, Jade asked Helen why this was his business. Helen said she'd set Jade free, but in return, he had to be her eyes and ears and help uncover Muter's crimes. She also figured Jade must be missing his wife and kid since he'd been stuck in prison for so long. Helen told Jade she'd wait for his answer until tomorrow. Jade went back to his cell, gazing at a picture of his son, Jansen. He thought hard about whether to accept Helen's offer. The next day, Helen returned to check if Jade was in or out. Jade nodded, saying he was in. Helen then spilled the beans that before Jade could leave this place, he needed to catch the eye of a guy named Adil. Helen stressed that Adil was the key to getting into Muter's gang. Adil's one of Muter's top guys stuck in the same prison. Later on, in the prison yard, Jade brainstormed ways to get Adil's attention. Finally, he decided to give a good beating to a guy who worked for Adil. But that got the guards' attention, and they threw Jade into solitary confinement. After a few days, they let him out, and sure enough, Adil came looking for him. So, Adil asked Jade why he suddenly beat up his guys. Jade explained he was just killing time, knowing he'd be out of prison soon and had no job waiting for him. Adil, who already knew Jade had a mean streak in prison, offered him a job when he got out. The catch was that Jade had to off a guy in cell 157. Reluctantly, Jade agreed. That evening, Jade walked over to cell 157 and did the deed, just like Adil told him to. From then on, Jade hung out with Adil's crew and followed his orders. Eventually, Jade got released from prison, and Adil told him someone would pick him up tonight. Once free, Jade tried to see his wife at her workplace, but he was in for a shock. His wife was pregnant, but not with his child. She told him she'd remarried because he'd been in the slammer for too long. Hearing all this, Jade put on a tough act and insisted he only wanted to see his son, Jansen. His wife agreed, saying they could meet the next day. That evening, some folks sent by Adil picked up Jade, but things took a nasty turn in the car. One guy named Jimmy revealed he was tight with Muter, the gangster boss. Jimmy warned Jade that if he ever double-crossed them, he'd be in big trouble. They let Jade out of the car after that. The following day, Jade visited his ex-wife's place. He met her new husband and finally got to see Jansen, the son he hadn't seen in ages. It was awkward at first, as Jansen was meeting his real dad for the first time. Later on, Jade met up with Helen, the head of the federal agents, at an art gallery. Helen told Jade he had to spill the beans on all of Muter's crimes so he could go back to a normal life. She handed Jade a GPS device and a recording gadget for the mission. One evening, while Jade was in his apartment, Jimmy approached him and urgently asked him to come with them. They all hopped into a car, and Jade's head got covered with a cloth. They drove to someplace unknown, and when they arrived, they finally took the cloth off Jade's head. Turns out, they'd brought Jade to patch up a gunshot wound on one of the gang members. What's surprising is that Jade used to be a pretty famous surgeon in the city. As Jade was about to treat the wounded gangster, Jimmy kept on insulting him. Fed up with it, Jade asked Jimmy and the others to leave so he could focus on the surgery. But Jimmy didn't like that and pointed his gun at Jade, saying he couldn't boss them around. Luckily, Muter showed up and put a stop to the chaos. Muter ordered everyone out, except himself, because the injured guy was his nephew. Using his medical skills, Jade managed to remove the bullet from Muter's nephew's leg. Afterward, Muter thanked Jade for helping out his nephew. A few days later, Muter's crew, including Jade, paid a visit to another gang led by a guy named Boba. Muter asked Boba if he wanted to start a fight with his gang. Boba replied that he was just interested in doing business, and they should mind their own business without causing any trouble. Boba also apologized for shooting Muter's nephew in the leg, explaining that it happened because Muter's nephew was trying to shoot him first. Hearing this, Muter told Boba to do his business in the eastern part of Kedah, but still had to pay taxes to Muter. After that, Muter's gang headed back to their usual hangout spot. Jade seemed to be getting friendly with some of Muter's crew. Not long after, Jade was surprised to see his former neighbor, Diddy, now working with Muter. Jade knew Diddy's parents well. Muter also mentioned that Diddy was one of his top guys when it came to drug deliveries. Then he told Jade to step out because there was a job for him. As Jade left, he secretly planted a GPS tracker in Muter's car. Before long, Jimmy showed up with one of his guys, Michael. They instructed Jade and Michael to transport some drugs hidden in a flower pot. After that, they had to take different routes back home. Jimmy reminded Jade that if he messed up, he'd be in big trouble. Long story short, Jade and Michael reached their destination. Michael took his flower pot of drugs and left first. But just as Jade was about to leave, a bunch of guys ambushed him. In a rush, Jade managed to sneakily plant the GPS tracker on the attacker's car. After they left, Jade had no choice but to follow them, and it turned out they were heading to Gangster Boba's headquarters. So, Jade went up to Boba's men and told them he wanted to meet Boba and get back the flower pot they swiped. They saw Jade was all by himself, so they let him in. When Jade got to their base, Boba was pretty impressed with his guts for showing up alone. But Boba made it clear that bravery alone wouldn't save Jade, as he planned to take him out soon. However, there was this one moment when Jade managed to grab Boba and take back the stolen drugs. After that, Jade made a run for it. Long story short, Jade got back to Muter's place and explained the delay was because Boba's crew robbed him of the stuff he was supposed to bring. At first, Muter didn't fully believe Jade, so he needed proof. Jade showed them a gun he'd swiped from Boba. Finally, Muter trusted Jade, and they decided to go to war with Boba's crew. The next day, Jade went to meet Helen and handed over all the evidence he'd gathered about Muter's crimes. Jade asked if it was enough to arrest Muter. Helen said no and told Jade to keep being her spy until she could catch Muter. Later, Jade bumped into Diddy. He wasn't pleased to see Diddy now mixed up with gangsters. Jade advised Diddy to leave Muter's gang if he had the chance. But surprisingly, Diddy asked for Jade's help because the people he'd sold drugs to hadn't paid up, and he was afraid Muter would hurt him. So Jade went to see the buyers and made sure they paid up before things got messy. A few days later, Jade, Diddy, and Muter's nephew were given a task to deliver some drugs. But while they were in the car, Boba's gang showed up and attacked Muter's nephew, sadly killing him. Devi and Jade managed to escape by ducking into a nearby shop. Helen, who was secretly watching, stepped in to protect Jade. Eventually, Jade ran into Helen. During their meeting, Helen warned Jade to be cautious and she'd handle Boba's gang. Little did they know, Diddy overheard their conversation. Not long after, Jade and Diddy got back to Muter's place, and Muter started suspecting that one of his own crew had betrayed him. He figured Boba's gang and the cops were onto their drug delivery plan. The next day, Muter and some of his guys gathered at their usual torture spot. Muter had figured out that the traitor in his crew was Michael. So, Muter pressured Michael to confess. At first, Michael denied it, so Muter ordered Jimmy and Jade to torture him. After a lot of pain, Michael finally admitted that he'd spilled the beans about the drug delivery to Boba's gang. He did it because they'd threatened his mother. Then Muter asked if Michael had planted a GPS in his car or was working with the police. Michael swore he hadn't, but Muter didn't buy it, and sadly, Michael was killed. After that, Jade met up with Helen and handed over evidence of Muter's voice recordings he had. Jade also warned Helen that Muter was recruiting young guys to join his gang. So Jade urged Helen to arrest Muter immediately. Jade was feeling anxious that his cover would be blown soon. Helen told him to hang in there until the right moment came. Helen promised she'd definitely arrest Muter. The next day, Jade and Jansen were spotted having a great time playing together on the playground. Jade was getting closer to his son, and they tried out lots of games that made Jansen really happy. Meanwhile, on the flip side, Muter was grilling Diddy with questions. He wanted to know how Diddy and Jade managed to escape from Boba's gang's attack the other day, even though Muter knew they'd gone into a shop and should have been trapped there. In the end, Diddy spilled the beans, saying that the police had saved them at that time. Not only that, but the police also had a chance to talk to Jade. After hearing Diddy's story, Muter finally figured out that Jade had been working as a spy for a federal agent all along. Sometime later, as Jade and Jansen were heading home, they got ambushed by Muter's gang. They planned to take Jade out after discovering he was a spy. Luckily, Jade pulled a fast one and got his son safely to his ex-wife's house. Before Jansen got out of the car, Jade apologized to him for not being a good dad. As Jade was about to head back to his apartment, he urgently contacted Helen to let her know his cover was blown. But before he could finish the call, Muter's men blindsided him. They quickly shoved him into a car, heading straight for a torture spot. When they got there, Muter wanted to talk to Jade over the phone. He expressed his deep disappointment in him for betraying him. Muter chillingly announced that he would kill Jansen and her ex-wife as a consequence. Jade pleaded with Muter not to involve them, but it fell on deaf ears. Jimmy mentioned that Muter would personally oversee the killing of Jade's family, so he asked if there was any last message Jade wanted to convey. Meanwhile, Jade discreetly worked on loosening his restraints. At a crucial moment, he attacked Jimmy and managed to take him down. After that, Jade rushed to Muter's headquarters to take out all of Muter's henchmen there. He didn't hesitate, killing one person outside before entering the headquarters to eliminate Muter's entire crew. When Jade reached the top room, Muter wasn't there. Instead, he found a group of young men recently recruited by Muter. He took their guns and told them to go home, including Diddy. But just as the young men left, Muter suddenly appeared and shot Jade in the leg, knocking him down. He was about to finish him off when Diddy returned, aiming his gun at Muter. Diddy had realized he was on the wrong path. Seeing this chance, Jade shot Muter, and he met his end. Afterward, Jade asked Diddy to promise he'd never get involved in the criminal world again. The moral of this story is that sometimes, even in the darkest situations, people can find redemption and make up for their past mistakes.